I'm Kevin Knapp, the History Program Manager with the Sheridan Community Land Trust. Welcome today to our Explore History on what remains of Monarch. Really, I'm glad to see such a turnout. It's a really important to our community, to the Sheridan area sort of topic. There's a lot of cool knowledge, and I was really nervous when I was first started putting it together because I'm the one with the least amount of knowledge, just inherent, organically, because so many folks actually grew up there or heard the stories. And so I'm always open to comments, questions, corrections, discussion about this topic. So the inspiration for this comes from the fact that SCLT has done some work on a few of the actual physical remnants of Monarch, and specifically the bridge that was just decommissioned and removed, and the cemetery where SCLT led a discovery session and had a bunch of volunteers go up and clean up the cemetery and do some research on what was buried there. We can go at the first slide there. But I want to start, not assuming that everybody knows everything about Monarch. So just the basics. Where is Monarch located? It's located 8 miles north of Sheridan on Interstate 90 on the other side of the Tongue River. That would be the site of what was Monarch. If we go to the next slide, we've just kind of overlaid map so you can kind of see how the town would have laid in that site. In Monarch, just to give you a kind of interesting anecdote about how it began, founded in 1903 when the CB&Q Railroad reached this area, and it was started by the Wyoming Coal Company, which was originally owned by John Kendrick, L.H. Brooks, and William C. Ervine. And the claim was actually acquired in 1903 by Edward Holbrook of Chicago, who organized the Wyoming Coal Mining Company. And it was kind of a scheme where they filed on homesteads and just kind of contiguously put together the land to be able to have a coal mine out of all these homesteads that they filed on. So they would pay people to claim that they had been on the land for 6 years or whatever it was that you needed to prove the homestead claim. And some of these people had never even seen the land that they were filing for at the government land office in Buffalo. And it became a lawsuit in 1907, the United States versus Launabaugh, because the Sheridan lawyer Ellsworth E. Launabaugh was helping with this. But in the meantime, they were under this lawsuit, but they were also building. They were bringing in the prefabricated houses, the shotgun houses you might be familiar with. Those were prefabricated and brought in from Washington State on the railroad and assembled. Opened a company store, and by 1907, when this lawsuit was really happening, they were already millionaires. So in May of 1907, the United States grand jury indicted the three for defrauding the United States. They were found guilty on 2 counts each of conspiracy to defraud the government and faced as much as 2 years in prison. They appealed, and they just kind of kept doing this. And the fact was that the statute of limitations was like 3 years on a crime like this, and so they just kind of waited that out, and they were found guilty, but there was nothing the government could do about it, because the statute of limitations had run out. So, Monarch was the largest coal-producing mine in Wyoming, and honestly in the United States, as far as I can tell. At that point. At its peak, it had approximately 1,000 people connected to Sheridan by the the streetcar, interurban streetcar. And, let's see, they even further consolidated. In 1920, They formed the Sheridan Wyoming Coal Company, which acquired the Sheridan Coal Company, the Kearney Coal Company, the Acme Coal Company, the Monarch Coal Company, and the Coy Coal Company. So they are all now under one monopoly, really. This one umbrella company. And that Sheridan Wyoming Coal Company controlled...
Now, 100% of them at that time were underground, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. All very dangerous, old-fashioned underground shaft mines. 14,000 acres of coal lands, a reserve of an estimated 650 million tons, and they were mining about 5 million tons a year in all of those company towns put together. And they, of course, owned all of the almost 900 cottages and hotels and other stores, and pool halls and dance halls and buildings. Okay, so let's kind of go through the next few. There's a nice postcard showing the scene from up on the hill looking back towards the Tongue River. Okay, next slide. And these are just kind of a quick bunch of slides to show you what is left over. This is the bridge before it was decommissioned. This is a kind of cool close-up from a larger poster that Monarch had made to advertise their town. And I like the kid on there. It's an interesting bridge because it has the vehicle deck, but then it's got a railroad trestle deck on the other side. The main point for that being to deliver the coal from in the mine across to the tipples and into the railroad on the other side of the river. And you'll hear, hopefully we get our audio working on the video. I was going to play a little bit where you'll hear somebody growing up there who talked about how it was a tradition to, as the kids, if there was a wedding or something, they would block off the bridge and you had to give them candy or a coin to get across. Okay, next. So you can still see the water tower. You can see in the background there, right? They're actually in the process of removing the bridge with the crane. So when you're there at that crossing, you can look up and see the old water tower. Now, I will call attention to the fact that this was done by a kid named Ethan Johnson. He's a drone pilot, so I want to give him credit for his video and photography. Okay, next. Off to the left, if you cross the bridge, you can see there's still a mule barn from Monarch. Okay, next. Now, this is still there too. It's not publicly accessible. It's on the Padlock Ranch's property, but they're very open to collaboration and so on. So there could be a chance, say, that we talk to them and maybe had a tour out there or something. I just found out that there for a while there was somebody living in there, but right now I guess it's
that was Bill White and Brooke Foster.
okay.
And I built the step that goes up onto the stage. While they owned it, I went in and built that for them.
All right.
I didn't charge them nothing. Good friends.
Well, maybe you should take us on a tour. Okay, next slide. The foreman's house is still actually there too, but once again, not publicly accessible. Next. But here we are at the cemetery that's actually across the interstate. On the padlock, but they gave us permission to go up there and have our volunteers.
Do you know when they run the road through there, did they move a couple of graves?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
I think they had to.
Right.
Because right where the interstate, there was some graves there too, and they're gone.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see a little later with some of the maps we've made that they're not all just contained within that one fence.
Right.
You start looking and there's a scatter of mounds of unmarked graves that kind of goes out from that as an epicenter. So I would not be surprised, especially because Kearneyville and Monarch were pretty much contiguous. You know, there wasn't much space between the two towns before the interstate came.
There's some other graves moved too, the Pawnee graves, where they were mining down back, and there was a bunch of Pawnee graves there. It had to be Pawnee because of the date on the time on the top. They were some of the first of those. I'll show you.
That sounds like the beginning of like a Stephen King novel. Do Not Disturb, right? Okay, next. But also, I include this, even though it's not technically a part of Monarch. It was the Carneyville Clean Burn Cemetery. But it's associated with that St. Thomas Catholic Church that I was showing earlier. And you can see this, right? This is very close to the interstate as you're just about to come down the hill. So just want to make sure I mention it because it's so visible and is associated with the St. Thomas Church. Okay. So one of the resources that's really important in trying to figure out changes over time and how things were laid out in the Sanborn fire insurance maps that were produced pretty consistently. So I mean, I have one from 1908, one from 1920, one from 1927. So you can kind of track infrastructure changes by looking at these maps. You know, so you can see in this one, well, I think I show some close-ups if we go to the next one. You know, so you can see here, this is the bridge we were talking about going to a tipple to load the railroads, and you know, you can see the water tower here, and it's kind of interesting. There's a suction pipe here that takes the water to the tower, and then it's feeding a line in through the machine shop, across to the tipple for various purposes. I would assume they got water supports over there. They got to keep the coal dust down. They're always ready for fire. And at first I was trying to figure out if anyone had indoor plumbing, and not really. You can see that they have 4-inch pipes going down the center of the roads, and then these are hydrants, these black dots. And so that was what they were really trying to do, was make sure there was always water available in case of a fire. Because people were heating their homes with coal as well. And that could be kind of dangerous if you didn't pay attention. So fire was actually a very real danger. But you can see here, this is the foreman's house. You can see the pipe. Actually, he did have indoor plumbing. He was the one person in the whole town. And then it talks about, let's see, they used steam to keep the water from freezing. They didn't run it at night. There's a night watchman. Could do 152 gallons per minute. It held 15,000 gallons using gravity pressure of 62 pounds. And then they had hose carts, 3 different hose carts with 400 feet of 2-inch hose. So those were the fire crews who could go out to those hydrants and attach their hose if they needed to. Okay.
Almost all those early day mines just had a Catholic church out, because most of the miners were Slavic and quite a few Italians too, but anyway, they were Catholic people, so the church would always move in and set up a church. So almost all of it I went, and most of them then throughout the years contributed a lot of ball players to the state champion football teams.
Right.
And I mentioned that Monsignor Beavers, Catholic priest, and he told me, I told him I thought it was because the church really pushed sports like that.
Huh.
And he said he thought it had more to do with the people who were bigger than average people. I don't know.
Oh. Somebody was telling me a story about the basketball team and how they had an indoor basketball court with really low ceilings. And so whenever they play against those guys, it was a whole different thing because they could shoot it really low and still make a basket. I'm glad you mentioned that though, because actually I did want to, before moving on, I was going to mention that so the Catholic Church, so the Catholic faithful of the St. Thomas Parish are interred in that graveyard that I showed last. And in 1907 they built a church, but it was, let's see, between 1907, let's see, what is that? Oh, between 1917 and 1924, the church was burned down 3 times. And no one was ever charged but it was arson according to the sheriff. And articles in the Sheridan Post were pretty indicative that it was the Ku Klux Klan, which had 500 members in Sheridan at the time. And so that last church was moved into Monarch, where it could be more secure maybe, and built out of stone. And someone mentioned at the last one that they felt like there was kind of a tit for tat sort of thing between the Methodists and the Catholics with these sort of attacks. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. That cemetery was founded, like I said, in 1907. The first burial was a 2-month-old boy. And in general, the cemetery is reflective of the harsh conditions in both of them. When you do research, one of our volunteers, Todd Bolt, did a bunch of research on the Monarch Lutheran Cemetery, and it's, injuries from mining in a lot of it, but also babies and infants, Spanish flu. So kind of what you would expect from the harsh conditions of a mining camp in that period. Let's see. Got so much information here. Well, let's go ahead. I thought I would share, we have a GPS self-guided audio tour, Black Diamonds tour is what it's called. And you can drive around and it tells you to look over to the right and you see this and that. So this is the story site for Monarch, and I thought we would just share that. Hopefully we've got audio.
Black Diamond Trail audio tour site number 5, Monarch Townsite. Wyoming Coal Mining Company opened the first of several Monarch mines in 1903 to 04. The last one closed in 1953 during the bust that followed World War II. Outlasting other mines in the region, many of which closed in the 1920s, Monarch was the largest and longest-running underground mining operation in Sheridan. Although Interstate 90 slices between the former towns of Monarch and Kearneyville-Cleanburn, these two communities were previously adjacent. Located east of I-90, Monarch's Protestant Cemetery overlooks the Kearneyville-Cleanburn town site and Catholic Cemetery, located farther south. Approaching the former town of Monarch, you cross the old bridge, which served coal cars, automobiles, and pedestrians. Residents remember charging tolls for passing wedding parties as part of a local tradition called chivalry.
When we were kids and they'd have weddings, there's that bridge out there by Monarch. Well, after the wedding, us kids would get a rope across the road. You wouldn't get by until you gave us something.
Lenora Gazdick.
The kids had a big old rope and would tie from one tree to the other. And chivalry, everyone that got married, they had to give the kids candy. You wouldn't drop the rope till they'd treat them. It was just part of the expectation of everyone that lived there, I guess.
Pastor Robert Logan.
But we always beat on cans, out and screamed. And
of course, the padlocking bells on bed springs and things were another trick that was done too.
Alice Warnicki and Leon Washut. Across the bridge are the mule barn and remains of other buildings that served the mining operation. Mine entrances were located in the now reclaimed hillside, topped by the old water tower. The town itself spread across the cultivated field to the west. When the mine opened, it was equipped with electric power and employed 325 men. The town initially had 40 houses, 4 boarding houses, a company store, schoolhouse, and mine facilities. It eventually grew to a community of 2 churches and 1,200 residents. Despite its considerable size, the community was a tight one, as described by former residents.
We cared for one another. We socialized. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew what everybody was doing. Everybody took care of everybody's kids.
Pastor Robert Logan.
I don't think any of us would have traded our life growing up in Monarch for growing up anywhere else. As strange as it may seem, we figured that, we were poor neighborhood. We didn't have all the modern sanitation things that city kids had. But we had a life growing up out of Monarch, the closeness to the community that we wouldn't trade for anything. No regrets whatsoever. It's just the best place in the world I could ever think of to grow up.
Bill J. Mintock. When the mine closed on July 15, 1953, so did the town. Many residents moved or were forced to move to Sheridan. Buildings were hauled away. The old company store stood through the 1980s, but all that remains now are scattered foundations, the foreman's house, and St. Thomas Catholic Church, now a private residence. St. Thomas had been located in Carneyville, where it burned to the ground twice. When rebuilding it, the congregation used stone instead of wood and located it in Monarch, where it has stood the test of time.
They wouldn't even move out of Monarch. How many people that they had to evacuate and get out? I mean, they just plain did not want to move.
Lois Washut. Although the Sheridan mines had unusually good safety records, accidents did occasionally happen. Wives feared daily for their husband's safety.
I was scared to death of the mine. I used to think of these women who knew every day their husbands were going down inside that mine. I used to wonder how they made it through the day.
Lois Washut.
There was always the fear of, especially the wives of miners, like my mother and everybody else's wife. They just kind of dreaded when they get the word, because if there was some kind of an accident in the mine, the whistle blew, and the fear was always there. And
John Cavalock. Due to dangers of the job, the mine doctors were important community members. They were selected by the union, and they figure prominently in people's memories, not only for their aid to miners, but also to the families who went to them for snake bites, broken bones, and everyday needs.
Dr. Clegg didn't have too much of competition, but he always wanted to make sure that he got reelected, so he always managed a week or so ahead of the election to get a couple of kegs of beer, and of course the beer was free. Doc Clegg always got reelected again. He was a mine doctor.
John Cavalock.
Dr. Pratt, who was the mine doctor for a few years, he was a good singer, and he was the one that formed this Polish choral group. Of course, they taught him how to sing in Poland, and they were really, I've got to say, very, very good.
Lois Washut. In a community that revolved around masculine work in the mines, it's surprising that following Dr. Pratt, Monarch had a female physician, Dr. Kirkland. She was remarkably well accepted and was the last doctor to serve Monarch.
Female doctor, a single female doctor, which was kind of neat and kind of a surprise, because here you're in a community of rough, tough coal miners and a female physician, but she worked out perfectly fine. And she fell in love with one of the local residents, Andy Kuchera, and they later married. To my knowledge, she was always accepted. I can't remember people questioning, what is she doing here, or anything like that.
Lucian Trushin.
And I think a lot of the women did like it.
Alice Warnicki. You have come to the end of this segment. Please proceed to the next site and continue the tour.
Was she after Dr. Pratt?
Yeah, they were saying she was the very last one.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Pratt was the one just before. They both did a lot of work for the community as well as just the miners. They're both real well liked doctors.
It's kind of interesting to have to get elected as a doctor. One of those last guys there, Lucian, he told me about remembering VJ Day very vividly. Going to Mass in both of the churches every week to celebrate that day.
That's still going to be it'll be a big political football for a long time to come down there at the same mine. The guy that bought it, that was gonna make products out of coal like Driscoll pipes and things. Instead of that, he discovered he's got several $1 billion worth of lithium and various rare earth minerals there that are worth millions. So
Yeah.
the whole river is full of them. So you know it's always going to be kind of political.
Yep. 100%. All right, let's listen. Okay, so now this, of course, is not there anymore. The mine has been closed, but that would have been the main shaft coming out of the side of the hill off to the left across the bridge. We go along this bluff, and you can go to the walk-in area John Booyock donated. Next, another shot of the electric engine coming out with some loaded cars. Okay. And actually along that part of between the river and that bluff was the end of the line for the interurban streetcar. So that's a shot of that streetcar there in that area. Okay. But to really understand the extent and impact of Monarch, you have to know what was underground. And I have this map over here to look at closer. So if we go to the next slide, you can see how extensive it is, right? This is the town site of Monarch. This is the main shaft. It goes back 2 miles. So you can see why there's so much subsidence and underground coal fires and things like that, because it's honeycombed throughout there for many square miles. Okay. And so if you're just following kind of the progress, they come out of that mine shaft and then down to the bridge. This is not obviously the bridge we're talking about. This must have been previous to. It's a wooden structure. They loaded those cars by hand, 2 or 3 tons of coal each. Another shot kind of from up near the water tower showing, the path to the Tipples. Okay. Similar shot from in a postcard. This is the machine shop that we're seeing there. Okay. We get another shot. People like to take pictures from that spot. Next. And here it is again on the Sanborn map. Go ahead. And then once you get across the river, the track on the left is where the loaded cars went up, pulled by a large chain with hooks called dog chains. And then the track at right is where the empty cars would return after dumping into the railroad cars. Next. So they show that there. Actually, just one more, and I think I show a close-up of those. Certainly wouldn't want to be anywhere near that if it failed. Fell off. Okay, next. Oh, another shot. I kind of like that one because you actually see how the train cars would go underneath there. Okay. And I guess I'm kind of all over the place in this presentation, but before I go on to the bridge, I did want to mention, in there, you heard someone mention the choral group. Jack was mentioning baseball. Another thing that the town was pretty proud of and known for was the Monarch Band. In June of 1914, they played at Stampede Days in Sheridan and marched the Sheridan Parade route to the Sheridan Inn. They'd only been in existence for about 11 months. A number of Polish boys at the Monarch camp purchased mail-order cheap instruments and started playing around the camp. None of them could read music, but they had a lot of community encouragement, and they got donations from major people like Peter Coy and Decker Cummings Music Company, and they got uniforms and better instruments eventually, and they would play at the depot there.
They had a program on KWYO. I can't remember 1 or 2 days a week where they had Polish varieties.
Yeah.
And those guys all got together and they made great music.
And actually, in this Black Diamond tour, when you're driving between sites, you'll hear some of those old broadcasts being played. But also, I think it's kind of what you're saying about baseball. A part of it was because there was language barriers and so on. They had these formal Americanization classes to learn English and to learn American history and governmental structure, and then get citizenship. So I imagine baseball was an appealing thing to become American.
And for football, that's when Sheridan started dominating state championship football teams, and a big share of the team came from Monarch.
Okay, but then, so I couldn't really pin down where I got this and what year this was, but I think it was the 60s maybe. You can still see there's a significant amount. That's the company store over on the side there. And there were a lot of buildings still there until the 70s, the late 70s at least. So now, okay, let's see what the next slide is. Another shot by the kid Ethan, just before it was taken out. Let's go to the next one. Oh, okay. So the bridge was taken and moved just up towards, you see the railroad tracks in the back. This is like just near the exit. And Padlock is allowing an easement there to be an interpretive site. We'll have a sign that we put there. But the volunteer I mentioned, Todd, he's the one who noticed when they were clearing out the brush that there was something down in the water that looked historic. And so we had the crane take out this old mine cart that's actually in pretty good shape. Next, see a different angle of it there. So that'll be there too, which I think really adds to the interpretive site. And there's another one that wasn't in such good condition. You can see, what it looked like when it was new, those little tiny wheels. Okay, and I think the next one. This is one from Cleanburn that sits up on North Main at the pawnbroker. And we kind of used the measurements and dimensions on that one to do some estimating of how much coal was being taken out of there. What's next? Oh, okay, now it's fun to talk about this. All right, let's go back to the previous one. I thought I had... There's a video on our website of when they actually took it out.
Oh.
And it's kind of cool.
That's back a few.
Oh, we skipped over. Oh, that is it. That's the video. So we don't need to watch all 10 minutes, but if we could just kind of see some highlights at the beginning and end. Does it give you a play arrow right there? Oh, it's not, is it?
Yeah, no.
Well, that's okay. We don't need to check it out on our website if you want to. It's kind of cool because you see it getting lifted up and turn it around, and they just slowly drive the crane around the corner, and they got guys with ropes attached, keeping it from swinging too much. And, it's just kind of it was cool to see in person, for sure.
Is there very many of them carts left anywhere?
That's the only one I know of that's in that shape. And the guy says, the pawnbroker guy says that he has like 2 or 3 people stop and ask him about it a week. So I'm going to read you the text from the sign that we made. Now that actually the sign is only 250 words, but this was my long version before they made me cut it down. The bridge in front of you was constructed in 1909 by order of the Sheridan County Commissioners, as requested by the Wyoming Coal Mining Company and local county residents. The Canton Bridge Company of Canton, Ohio won the bid, and the construction cost the county $2,100. This type of bridge is commonly called a Warren Pony Truss Bridge with verticals. Before the Wyoming Department of Transportation was established, counties were responsible for building all roads and bridges in their jurisdiction. The county awarded the contract in August of 1909, and the bridge was finished by December of the same year. It served as the main vehicle and pedestrian crossing in and out of the Monarch coal mining camp to the railroad lines and passenger station on this side of the Tongue River. Monarch was one of the largest early 20th century coal mining operations in Wyoming and was a thriving community of around 1,000 members during its heyday. On the closest side of the bridge, note the remnants of a rail trestle that carried coal cars from the mine to the tipples on this side of the Tongue River. Each was loaded by hand with 2 to 3 tons of coal to be sorted and placed into railroad cars. Up to 100 cars a day crossed the bridge from the mine to the tipple and back. The coal was then shipped within Wyoming and across the United States. Although the new bridge carried motor vehicle traffic across the Tongue River for the first time, there had been a wooden rail trestle bridge for transporting coal since 1903. Coal mining helped power the industrial expansion necessary for decisive victory in World Wars I and II. From 1903 to 1951, more than an estimated 48.6 million tons of coal were removed from the underground coal deposits at the Monarch Mine, making it one of the most productive mines in early Wyoming history. Before it was decommissioned, the bridge served the community of Monarch for nearly 115 years. According to the Wyoming Department of Transportation, it was the oldest Warren Trust bridge remaining in active use in all of Wyoming. Even after the Monarch Mine was shut down in 1953 and the community was abandoned, this bridge still served as the main crossing point of the Tongue River in this portion of the county. Around 2015, the bridge was re-engineered to remove the wooden road deck and replace it with corrugated steel. By 2022, its condition made it no longer viable to repair, so the decision was made to replace it with a bridge of modern construction materials. In 2024, the bridge was decommissioned and moved to this location. So, now we'll talk about the cemetery, which is the other thing we worked on, which you see the X up there, that's kind of where it's at. It's not exactly super easy to see as you're driving by on the interstate, but you can spot it if you try. Okay, let's go to this. Just kind of some shots. Let's see what the next one is. And this is on our day that we went up there. And, you know, you got the right non-acid cleaners and everything to make sure you're preserving the headstones, not damaging them. Next. And so this church no longer exists, but this was the church that was responsible for establishing that cemetery site. The mining company actually donated the land in 1907, and Reverend Frank Day of the Monarch Methodist Episcopal Church organized the cemetery and formed an association to care for it. There's a bunch of newspaper articles about dedicating it in 1908. It was a big deal, people came from all around. But they didn't get the memo that dinner was, and entertainment was going to happen at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So only one newspaper article mentioned that there was a misunderstanding and they came hours late to the dinner and entertainment. Okay, let's go to the next. What's this? 3 minutes. Let's check this out. This is a little video. This was actually before I got hired. I was just working for them as a videographer, and I made.
Cleanup, then we're going to start doing some documenting and checking names on lists that I need to make. So that's kind of a different part of this job. So I have spray bottles.
Is a village over in Finland. It's actually a very famous village where they called him the White Death, the most famous sniper of World War II. He was from Monty. There's still an arms factory there. LAHT. And that was the first generation of Finn immigrants. That was very common for them to put their home village on their headstone.
These are my great-grandparents.
Just fascinated with the history. And I've only been in this area for like 6 years, and every time I drive by, I want to get up here, And I've been all over Acme, and as little as I could go over there. The history just fascinating.
Just longing for a toothbrush.
Sure.
That would be the perfect tool.
Just kind of a perfect activity for our organization to get volunteers involved, learn some history, get outside. Okay, so let's go back. So yeah, I used the drone to do this sort of photography. That's just a straightforward shot looking down. And then if we go to the next one, this is what I was talking about. Like, this is the main cemetery, but then there's actually a cow fence that encloses a larger area. I mean, you can see another small fenced-in plot there. Let's go to the next. So then we use the drone photography to start making these maps. This is one that just shows the people who actually do have headstones, with close-ups of their headstones. When they were out there, the volunteers would make little hand-drawn maps showing the location and writing down the information in case it wasn't, legible in the photograph. We tried to take as good a photograph as we could. And there's so many. This is all put in the Wyoming room, so anyone who wants to go and check it out, you can spend a lot of time kind of combing through the information that we figured out. This one is unmarked graves that we noted. So some of them had been known before. And the white ones, and they actually are definitely an unmarked grave, not just we think it is, because there's like one of those little like bronze head, like just where you put a card in and sort of thing, just falls over on the ground, nothing in it anymore. The green ones are ones that had not been identified in that way, but seemed pretty obvious from the way that the vegetation was, or the sinking, or there's a different type of spot. All right, let's go to the next. So like I said, there's so many different versions where we try and show all the details. That's the headstone that's inside that smaller fenced area there. Another person from Lottie, or maybe that's the same one they were looking at. Okay, next. So once again, see, if you look at that previous map was just inside the main fence. But outside, that's how many unmarked graves. And so part of the research that sits in the Wyoming room is a list of people known to be buried in Monarch who don't have headstones. We haven't necessarily, I don't know how we would. But if anybody is inspired to go look at that, at that research and start connecting the dots between the names of people, how they died, when they died, and where they might have been buried, that's all the clues are right there. Okay, next. Just another, this is kind of can't really see it very well, but you can see it. This is how the volunteers were doing it that day. They were drawing, the location of the cow fence and trying to give us everything we needed to put it together later. Okay? Just an example of a close-up of the headstones and how that looks. Okay, so this is another source for some information. This was done by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1945, maybe, if I remember right. They had a flood, a pretty major flood in 1944. And so then they started to develop this plan to build new levees. That's what they're showing, a proposed levee. That never happened. But I do like this map because it shows me what was in the town in 1945. So I refer to that one. I think if we go through the next few, there's just some documentation of the flood. Flash flood puts town underwater. She's pretty happy looking for what's going on. Okay, and then, we're kind of talking now about the decline, right? In the 1920s, there was a decline. Of course, there was a second boom kind of around the war, but even then, by 1940, a gas pipeline had reached Sheridan. So people were converting more and more the use of natural gas for home cooking and heating. But of course, the real main thing is the diesel, the railroad converting to diesel. So the demand for coal really began to diminish. Monarch stayed open longer than others, but by July of 1953, there was an announcement, and actually someone was in the crowd who had done some research last week and read a little bit from one of the notices that they sent out, saying you have the privilege of relocating yourself to Sheridan. So let's see. But this is how it appeared in the paper. The Sheridan Coal Company is closing Monarch Camp. The Sheridan Wyoming Coal Company is vacating its Monarch Camp effective the earliest possible date. And letters signed by Walter J. Johnson, president, and dated this week, Monarch residents are requested to vacate as soon as you can, possibly. The Monarch store was closed today. On May 8th, a joint announcement was made of consolidations by the Sheridan Wyoming Coal Company, Incorporated, and the Bighorn Coal Company. Production will be handled by the Bighorn Coal Company and sales by the Sheridan Wyoming Coal Company, the announcement said. At that time, employment severance notices were given to miners employed in the Monarch Mine. Before the spring layoff, 118 men were employed. 76 worked underground, the rest were outside doing office work and stuff like that.
You said it was 1944?
53.
Oh, 53.
Yep.
Quite a few of those miners left and went down to the Trona mines.
Yeah, if you could still work in the mines, that was your skill set. And then a lot of families moved into town, and that's why I show this diagram of the shotgun house, because, as a lot of you probably know, they would move these into town, or they would move them to be used as ranch housing, A lot of them got moved and then not really used. They just kind of sat on railroad ties for a while.
Where does the name shotgun house or shack come from?
Because it's long and skinny, and there's a door in the front and a door in the back. So that's like a shotgun barrel.
The bathrooms didn't come until they moved it.
Right. Look at how the bath is in the kitchen.
Yeah. The ones that are left in Sheridan, a lot of them were an addition off the kitchen.
So it's sticking out. Yeah. Okay, and then if we go to this is the last slide, I think. Even those aren't. Well, some of them are not with us anymore as of recently. So I think that's it. Yeah, that is my presentation. Any comments, questions? Yeah.
So, in our family archive somewhere, when was the last? So you think 53 was the last day that the post office commercial tower was open?
I would assume so. They made it pretty clear.
Because we have and I'm sure we're not the only ones. Dad worked Bighorn Coal. We have a postcard, and I couldn't find it today. It was dated on this is handwritten. This is the last day of the Monarch post office.
Yeah,
and then they sent those people went down there and then sent them to their current address.
I think I saw that in that it's Stanley Kuzara's book. They have a copy of one of those too, but I don't recall what the date was.
We have one somewhere, but I can't find it.
Maybe somebody can fill me in on this. I had a good friend who was raised in Monarch, and she told me that the women in those little towns and in Monarch, to pass a lot of the time, they formed softball teams, and they were very good and very competitive. I don't know if anybody here knows any more about that.
I don't. Yeah.
You want to share about that map you got in front of you there,
Yeah,
Kevin?
yeah, and if you guys, when you're done, or when, now that I'm done, before you leave, I have the shaft, the one that shows all the galleries and shafts. And then there's this map of Monarch that is kind of a conglomeration of all the different Sanborn maps, but there was a guy, Walt Pilch, who in the 90s got together with as many people as he could find who had memories and just kind of notated things, like here's where we got ice, or there was a water wheel used to irrigate the garden. And then a little key over here, a little index, where they numbered all the houses and tried to name everyone who lived in those houses. So it's kind of a cool map, especially if you're looking for information about your family or somebody you know. So welcome to check that out. Yeah, if that's it, thanks folks.